morning and welcome to Amberger's Smackdown at TaipanFinancialNews.com. I'm your gracious host, J. Christoph Amberger, and we're here to talk politics. Well, here we are, less than 3 weeks away from Election Day, and I have to say that this so far has been one of the most shallow and vapid campaigns I've ever seen in my life. The main slogan seems to be, "I'm not George Bush. Heck, and that's just the Republicans." Democrats apparently have no program at all, other than the fact that they too aren't George Bush. Oh, I forgot. The other day when I was driving home, I saw a fair weather peace activist having her preschooler hold up a sign that said, "My mom says don't hit," which pretty much sums up the Democrats' platform on homeland security, with 90% of House Democrats voting against the terrorist surveillance program, 3/4 of Senate Democrats and 80% of House Democrats voting against the Terrorist Interrogation Act. Let's just hope Osama bin Laden and Kim Jong-il pick up on that bit of Gyno-American wisdom as they drive through downtown Baltimore. But what's most surprising is the apparent lack of urgency with which the White House is treating this election. After all, some bean counters say the GOP could lose as many as 40 congressional seats. A loss of 15 would flip control of the chamber to the Democrats. A loss of 6 seats would yield control of the Senate. Today I've invited my colleague Todd Schoenberger here to try and make sense of this. Todd is the editor of Diligent Investor and a regular contributor to TaipanFinancialNews.com. So Todd, what do you make of this? Has the Bush administration outsourced its media work to Cindy Sheehan and Babs Streisand?
Well, you're right about this, Christoph. They need to look to their publicists because they are not beating the drum the way that they should be. You have tremendous job growth in this country. You have a low unemployment rate. Clearly, you have an economic growth cycle that is working and is making the U.S. consumer or the average American feel pretty good about his or her finances. So, yes, they should be beating the drum, and they're not. And unfortunately, I'm not quite sure why.
Do you think this has anything to do with any secret strategies that we're missing as yet? Is there an October surprise in the works?
Well, my only guess is that they feel that they cannot really strive and talk about this great economy. I mean, when you look at the raw numbers, you see that the U.S. economy has grown about 11.5% over the last 3 years. Now, when you take a look at prior cycles and you look at the second term of Bill Clinton, when we went to the midterm elections, we saw the economy growing at about 14.5%. Back in Reagan's second term, we were at 18.5%. So if Bush comes out and the administration says, okay, we got a rah-rah economy, that's great, but Democrats might come back and say, you know what, it's not the hyper-growth that we had once before. It's not a giddy economy.
Well, we're looking at new debt levels, 1.9% of GDP for fiscal 2006, which is actually below the 40-year average of 2.3%. We have increasing tax receipts. People are keeping more of their money, the money that they earn. Are Americans doing too well to buy into a Republican agenda?
Well, not necessarily, Christoph, because when you look at middle America, you got to think of the loss of manufacturing jobs that have gone overseas. Number two, you have to look at lower house values. That's a big issue here. A lot of people, you have more home buyers than ever now during this administration, but you're not seeing the U.S. consumer, the average U.S. consumer, hasn't really trickled down, hasn't seen that trickle-down growth that they probably saw in Clinton's second term and Reagan's second term. But gross domestic product figures are not always what they seem to be. I mean, we had higher GDP rates back in '92 that didn't help the president's father. We clearly, the congressional Democrats in '94 didn't help them, and it certainly didn't help Al Gore in 2000. So they really need to be careful. And I think when you're talking about an unpopular Iraqi war, we have the constant threat from the Taliban. Now, obviously, North Korea is jumping in the geopolitical fold. And yes, we did have higher energy prices, but we are seeing lower gas prices. Still, the U.S. consumer, the average U.S. consumer, isn't feeling that robust growth that they really need to.
Speaking of lower gas prices, I've heard a couple of actually quite educated people argue that lower gas prices currently are a ploy of a vast right-wing conspiracy. What do you think?
Well, I can't see how that can possibly happen. I mean, what is it that this administration or even the right-wing conservatives can actually do to influence lower gas prices? I mean,
Global commodity.
it is a
It's
global
global
commodity.
market.
It absolutely is. And if anything, we are seeing lower gas prices now as a result of lower crude oil prices. And that is mainly because of seasonality factors. We had a very benign hurricane season. We're not seeing a lot of people driving on the roads now. And until we get into the cold, raw winter months when heating oil will be more in demand, then you're probably not going to see higher gas prices for some time now.
So where do you see this election ending up?
Well, my concern is I really can see the Republicans maintaining control in the Senate, but not in the House of Representatives. You bring up some excellent points because you just don't see the Republicans really embracing what they need to do, that, beating the drum on prosperity, talking about that, hey, it's great to be an American, because we just don't have that civic pride right now. And I think what is happening is that we're probably going to lose the House. You'll see the Republicans maintain the Senate, but the only thing that's going to create is a lot of friction on Capitol Hill. I mean, there's not a lot of programs that are going to be
It's not like they have been getting a whole lot done with control of the House and the Senate to begin with in a recent year.
Well, you're right. But then when you start talking about if you have a Democrat-controlled House and then a Republican-controlled Senate, there's not going to be a lot of key issues. I mean, you'll talk about Social Security privatization. There'll probably be some room talking about generic generic prescription costs, because there'll be some room to move, or elbow room, with the new Medicare bill. But there's not going to be a lot of clear-cut major direction for this country probably for the next 2 years.
So in case the Democrats are able to take back the House, what do you see happening in the markets?
Well, I don't think it's really going to affect the markets. As a matter of fact, let the Democrats have the House and the Senate. I really don't see anything happening to these markets right now. If anything, we are going to see constant growth. The Federal Reserve has more power over the U.S. domestic markets than Capitol Hill does right now. And the fear is that, that you have Democrats in there, they're going to raise taxes. They might happen, but probably won't happen until the 2008 election. So we're not going to really see anything that's going to dramatically shift the way the markets are performing right now.
Anything you're recommending to your readers and subscribers?
Well, I have to say that right now we are between rate cycles. The Federal Reserve, this one and only Greenspan / Bernanke rate cycle is over. And if you take a look at history, that would mean that probably in the next 9 to 10 months, we will actually start seeing rate cuts, which put us at the end of March or maybe the early May meetings. If that happens, Fed starts cutting rates, you'll probably start seeing a housing rebound in early 2008. You'll see the markets continue to thrive. What I'm recommending is buy and hold traditional high-quality companies that are a part of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You see the real old-school stocks that are out there that are being the leaders, and they are propelling the Dow past the 12,000 mark.
Geopolitically, let's suppose the Democrats take the House. Do you see any change in the U.S. strategy in Iraq? Is there going to be a pull-out earlier than anticipated? How do you gauge that?
Well, I think that this Capitol Hill and this administration is going to have their hands full. Not only do we have the problems with Iraq, we clearly have Hugo Chavez to deal with now in Venezuela. We have the North Koreans we need to deal with. The North Koreans have the secret sauce to the ingredient that these countries, these anti-American countries, want so much. So when you start talking about oil prices and you start talking about the extra money that these countries have, these anti-American regions, then we are in a big concern. There's a big concern right now, a big threat that can happen. So I think their hands are going to be full. Will we pull out early out of Iraq? I don't think we will.
I think if we did, we'd have a bigger mess on our hands right now, with Iran waiting to take its slice out of Iraq, Turkey trying to regain control of the Kurdish regions of Iraq, Syria and Lebanon, also with clear ambitions there. Might be a bigger mess than they got in the first place. Yeah. Well, Todd, that's all the time we have today. For TaipanFinancialNews.com, I'm Christopher Amberger. See you next time.